Hi folks, it's Kate here from the Full Freezer, and today we are busting freezer myths. Myth number one, you have to freeze your food on the day of purchase. Absolute rubbish, you do not. It will taste better, it's better if you can freeze it sooner because obviously the quality will be better, but freezing food is like hitting a pause button. All it does is basically stops the food from degrading, stops anything more kind of happening to it. So by freezing it, you will maintain it in the state that it currently is. So if you've got something that's starting to go a bit squishy or a bit bendy, you don't just have to throw it away. You can prep it and freeze it. It could be if you've got some potatoes or some parsnips, you could make a mash, you could make a stew. And if you've not got time to be making those things, you can still, if you just get to the food before it's actually started to properly degrade or go mouldy, you can just cut it up, prep it, freeze it. And then at least when you want to make that stew or that bolognese or whatever, you've got food there. So tip number one, do not think that because you haven't frozen it on the day of purchase that you can't now freeze it. Okay, so myth number two. Myth number two is that freezer burn will make you sick. Now, if you don't know what freezer burn is, basically when you have frozen some food, you might get some meat or something, and you notice that it's got kind of a whitish grey kind of mottle through it. And sometimes as well, you might actually have vegetables and things that are literally like covered in ice. This is basically when food starts to dehydrate and when the water is coming out of the food and air's circulating around it, it can basically, it forms ice crystals on the food and within the food. Now, if you package it really well, often you can avoid too much freezer burn. So if you can vacuum pack things, that works really well. And I have got a separate video on how to do that at home without any special equipment. You just need resealable bags, some water and a straw. So I'll link to that. But they basically say it's perfectly safe to eat something with freezer burn. The issue is that it will degrade the food, so the flavour won't be as good, it won't taste as nice. But if you've pulled out some meat and it has got freezer burn, as long as you defrost it safely, and I will do another video on how to defrost safely as well, then it will be perfectly fine to eat. It's not an issue. So don't waste your food just because it's got freezer burn. Okay, so my third and final myth to bust today is that once you have thawed raw food from the freezer and cooked it, you can't freeze it again. So let's get that straight. So you've got something raw, you've got some chicken breasts, or you've got some frozen corn or some frozen vegetables, and you cook a lasagna or a bolognese or a tuna pasta bake, and you eat some of it, but you've made far too much. Just because those raw ingredients were frozen does not mean that you cannot then freeze the leftovers. It is perfectly fine as long as the raw frozen ingredients have been cooked into something else, then you can freeze them again. If you have thawed something that was frozen, and it's just, you know, it's a chicken breast, you've defrosted it, you have to cook it before you can freeze it again. You cannot just put it back in the freezer. Don't know the science behind this one, but just don't do it. It's not going to be good for you. So there you go, my top 3 myths about freezing food busted. 1, you do not have to freeze food on the day of purchase. As long as you would eat it today, you can freeze it today. 2, freezer burn will not kill you as long as you freeze, as long as you thaw your food correctly. And 3, you can take raw frozen ingredients, cook them and freeze them again. So there you go, guys. Hope that's helpful for you, and I will catch up with you again soon.